Welcome on this Monday. What a weekend we have had. What a day we are having. And there's probably going to be news between the start of the program and the end of the program, so don't go anywhere. I got a lot planned, including an interview with this most interesting author, Patrick McGee, about the rise of Apple in China, the capture of the world's greatest company. And he's telling you about the capture by the Chinese Communist Party of Apple, which is so timely because of the news in the Wall Street Journal. Surprise U.S.-China deal gives global economy a reprieve. Markets have taken off. But let me begin with a post that Donald Trump put up on Truth Social earlier today. President Trump writing, "This week, the Republicans are meeting in the Tax, Energy, and Ag committees on major pieces of the one big, beautiful bill," all in caps. Republicans need to unify in caps behind their highly respected chairman, Jason Smith, Brett Guthrie, and Glenn G.T. Thompson. Remember, these are men that truly strive to do what is right in caps for America. The Democrats, on the other hand, want to destroy our country. You must oppose these Democrat amendments, which in all fairness to them were made prior to my news conference this morning announcing that drug prices under our most favored nations policy will be going down from 50 to 90%, affecting everything that is done in a very positive way. When I return from the Middle East, where great things will happen for America, we will work together on any and all outstanding issues. But there shouldn't be many. The bill is great in capital letters. We have no alternative. We must win. But now, with the tremendous drug and pharmaceutical cuts, plus massive incoming tariff money, our great, big, beautiful bill just got bigger in caps and better in caps. The golden age of America will soon be upon us. Make America great again. That leads me to remind you, Job Creator Network, where I was 2 weekends ago, is a sponsor of our program. They are sponsoring right now taxcutsnow.com. Taxcutsnow.com. Go there and reiterate what 77 million Americans said last fall. We want our taxes cut. We want the Trump tax cuts of 2017 extended, made permanent, and expanded so that there's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was too late in arriving to save Trump in the 2018 midterms. But if this extension of that bill gets done quickly, then we don't have to lose the 2026 midterms. We really don't have to. And Job Creator Network knows that. Small business owners are the people that drive this economy. They need tax certainty. They don't need messing around on the margins. They need to get the idea that no new taxes is the bottom line. No new taxes. But you can make some more tax cuts. And join your voice. Taxcutsnow.com. People, investors, not people. Investors are a different group of people. Not traders, investors. Investors are very happy with the announcement of the China deal. Now, it's an hour left in the market, but I'm doing the market report early, brought to you by AmericanFederal.com, because the market is the story. The market is the big story today. When the announcement was made, and let me play you the announcement. This is Treasury Secretary Bessent in Switzerland, cut number 12.
The Trump economic plan is three pieces: trade, tax, and deregulation. Trade has been implemented first, and that process is occurring. We believe that the tax portion is going very well. Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, who I am in constant contact with, believe that midsummer we will pass, as the president likes to call it, his one big beautiful bill, and we believe that that will provide substantial relief for American households. And then deregulation, a hidden and pernicious tax on American households, is regulation. We believe that the last administration added several $1,000s a year to American families' cost, and that we will be not only cutting those rolling that back, but cutting those substantially.
And so then he went on with the big announcement, cut number 16.
to what was a very positive process. We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%. We had very robust discussions. Both sides showed great respect.
Okay, so after that, the market took off. Now, this is the market report. It's brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. You've been waiting to buy on the dip for gold, by the way. Today is a dip. I don't know if it's the final dip, but it is a dip. Because American Federal's phone number is right there on the screen if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, 1-800-221-7694. Some of you have been waiting for this dip in gold to get back in. Some of you trade gold. I don't. I just buy it every year at the same time. I buy it from Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. So can you, 800-221-7694. Well, after the Treasury Secretary made that announcement, market futures took off, and at this hour, you're still an hour to close. The Dow is up 2.7%. The S&P is up 3.09%, and the NASDAQ, tech-heavy NASDAQ, I think we're obliged to say, up 4.17%. Gold, however, is down 3.25% to $3,235 an ounce. Now, that's significantly higher than it was last year because gold has always been, for the past 100 years, past performance, no prediction of the future, but for more than 100 years, it has more than kept pace with inflation. And some people trade in gold and they move their gold to stocks and from stocks to gold, depending on which way they think the world's going. I think gold got a juiced gold bolt last week because of the tension between India and Pakistan and the little mini war they had, which has calmed down. Well, gold is down today, $108 an ounce. So if you're waiting for a mini dip to call Nick Grovich and his team, it's a mini dip. I don't know where gold will be tomorrow, the next week, or a year from now. I just buy it and save it. That's the way to invest. And if you want to begin investing, talk to Nick Grovich about the best strategy for you, 800-221-7694. But the president surely thinks the best strategy is to bet on America. He got into the Roosevelt Room, which is the room opposite the Oval Office in which a lot of people can be, held a big EO signing there, and then talked about all sorts of things. It will take me the better part of the entire show to get through everything President Trump said in the Roosevelt Room. Let's start with the most important thing, announcing the release of Idan Alexander, the Israeli-American hostage, cut number 8.
And third, I'm very happy to announce that Idan Alexander, an American citizen who until recently most thought was no longer living, thought was dead, is going to be released in about 2 hours, actually. And he's going to be released before the eyes of Steve Witkoff, who has done a fantastic job. I know a lot of people that have a lot of talent. I know Steve, he had a lot of talent. But I know a lot of people with a lot of talent, but there's one that I thought had a special way about him, special personality. Aside from being a good deal maker, had a special way about him, and it was Steve. Knew very little about the subject matter, who does? But he learned it in about 2 hours. And he's been fantastic, so I want to just thank Steve. But they're going to be releasing Idan in about 2 hours from now, or sometime today.
He was, in fact, released. Now, people have been talking about daylight between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu said that's ridiculous last week. To me, President Trump said no one's been better for Israel ever. And he's at least the equal of any president. Truman recognized Israel. Nixon saved it in 1973. Trump has been at least their equal. IDF said to coordinate with the United States to limit Gaza operations for a couple of hours before Idan Alexander was turned over, but there is no ceasefire. Israel continues in the Battle of Rafah. This was a gesture of goodwill by Hamas, I think probably at the urging of the Qataris, where the president is going after Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And I'm glad We got another hostage out. Every hostage that gets out, I rejoice. And so I'm very glad for him. And I think Israel's strategy, difficult as it is for some to understand, of keeping military pressure on the remnants of Hamas, is working, as is the president, as is Special Envoy Witkoff. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the Studio North. Now, I'm not staying here. I'm up here getting ready to change the studio around, reconfigure it, make it a little bit better for broadcast, a little bit better for audio. And I'll be back in Studio Beltway next week. So don't get used to this. This is all going to change. But nevertheless, I want you to know that I'm up north. And I also have to get the grill ready. BestHotGrill.com, if you need to get ready, is where you go for grads and dads. And even though Mother's Day is in the rearview mirror, and I hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day, you got Father's Day coming up, so do not forget the thing that Dad really wants is a BestHotGrill.com. The Solaire infrared grill goes to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. I want you to all remember that, Dad says he doesn't want anything, but what he really wants is a brand new grill. If you've got a grad in your life, someone who's leaving college for the first time, you go get them the hibachi. But it's dads and grandpas who get the big mega BestHotGrill.com. Go get the Solaire infrared grill. Dwayne's got one. I've got one. My kids have one. Why? Because we all like our steaks done outside. We all like them done really great. Also, if you like fish, that's not for me. You can grill fish on it. Chicken, great. Perfect. But really, steaks are what Best Hot Grill is for. Seal in the flavor. Get to 1,000 degrees in a minute or a little bit longer if you really want it like it's super, super hot. But BestHotGrill.com. Try it before you buy it, if you are so inclined, but go and visit BestHotGrill.com. Now I want to visit with Olivia Beavers of the Wall Street Journal, because I want to know how goes the one big beautiful bill about which President Trump posted right before he got on the airplane, Olivia, that the Republicans are supposed to listen to all of their chairmen and get this done. What do you think?
Well, there are definitely some moments where Republicans are not listening to the chairman. We're seeing two different fault lines sort of evolve, and it's something that we've talked in your show previously, so it's not a total major surprise. Last night, my colleague and I reported what the plan is for Medicaid coming out of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Basically, it touches on issues that centrists and moderates were willing to accept, but conservative and fiscal hawks feel like it doesn't go far enough. So you are seeing members like Chip Roy tweeting and kind of attacking that plan in terms of how to address that healthcare insurance system. On the other hand, you just had Ways and Means release 380 or so pages of text about how it plans to basically approach the tax plan. I haven't had a chance to go through all of it. We're starting to pull and get different pieces. Some of it we already knew. But the one fault line there is SALT, state and local tax, where you have Republicans from, high tax states like California, New York, New Jersey, who are not happy with the SALT caps and they want it raised. And the 30,000 that was proposed is something that they say they're not willing to bend on. And so SALT might be something that also impacts this bill going through. But we're waiting to kind of see it out. They're having meetings about it just today to try to get some of these SALT caucus Republicans on board.
Now, Olivia, the SALT caucus is on the moderate side of the Republicans. They're from blue states.
Yes.
The Freedom Caucus all over the place, most of them from pretty deep red states. Usually those two can trade off between each other. But when I was running down your story, I'm not quite sure where the Ways and Means is putting the SALT deduction cap at. What's the draft bill say about where it goes to?
I don't think that they have it in. I think they had 30,000, which is what they proposed in a meeting. But I don't think that that's been totally nailed down, even though that they're heading very quickly into a markup. So the SALT caucus has said that not all of them, mostly New Yorkers, put out statements saying that that's not good with them. So that number is still being really negotiated as we speak. And everyone's trying to do minute by minute updates of where those talks stand. But yeah, I don't think that no change on top rate, no corporate salt, no stock buybacks.
Stop
no
right
provision
there.
into
I had Chairman Crapo on the program on Friday, and the senator from Idaho didn't say not now, not ever, never to raising the top rate, but he pretty much did. And that was floating around on Thursday and Friday when the new pope was announced. It kind of got obscured. Was that a trial balloon that just didn't go anywhere?
Yeah, and I think it was raised by the big person in the party, the president, and it got very intense pushback privately and sort of publicly by Republicans in both the House and the Senate. There were a few ideas that they were toying with, but Trump then the president seemed to back off of it and say, like, well, it's up to you guys. We don't need it. And Republicans in Congress were like, great, we don't want it. So,
oh, well, great. Okay, so there is no
that
hike in
seemed to be
taxes.
going anywhere.
I've got two sponsors, Job Creators Network and Americans for Prosperity. They both unleashed on Thursday and Friday. In fact, taxcutsnow.com is a brand new website put up by the Job Creators Network. I'm sure AFP is going to do the same sort of thing with a different website, but taxcutsnow.com went up today. All of the groups, from Grover Norquist, who's got the longest pedigree, to the Club for Growth, to Job Creators Network, to Americans for... They all hated that idea. I've never seen an idea more universally and quickly hated. I don't think they all hate on salt, right? I really don't think they hated on the idea of raising the upper bracket in order to raise salt, but they don't hate on salt. The tax cuts are tax cuts. They just don't want to raise taxes in order to lower them for other people.
No, and one of the funny things about the president raising that idea, which, as you said, was face pretty swift backlash. One Republican pointed out to me, they're like, well, now he can go around saying Democrats can't attack me because for making tax cuts for the rich when I talked about taxing the rich. So they were joking that maybe the president has some sort of pushback to Democrats on that. But yeah, that definitely did receive pushback. And there are some conservatives who are upset about salt. And so when I was interviewing Chairman Guthrie for my Medicaid story, he said something I thought was kind of funny. He goes, we're trying to figure out where the red lines are. With some of them, I think I can tell if they are actually a red line. Whereas others, I think I can read people and tell them that is really where they are drawing the line. So you have Chairman Guthrie, you have Chairman Smith of Ways and Means. They're both trying to kind of work to figure out how they get to the number that they need, the 218, to get this bill passed.
When President Trump posts on True Social, they also have to pay attention to those two guys, Chairman Guthrie, Chairman Smith. Chairman Thompson, I assume, is ag. What's the big issue in ag?
SNAP. So that is another issue where centrist moderates are saying like they're concerned about SNAP programs, and they're warning against cuts there. So they're also going to be having a markup, I think, this week. So we will be probably hearing a little bit more on that to come.
So Chairman Crapo of Senate Finance told me midsummer, July 4th wouldn't be bad, but he wouldn't be nailed down. What do you hear from people? We have 25 seconds, Olivia. What's a date?
They keep pushing, the House at least keeps pushing it back. They want it sort of wrapped up by Memorial Day weekend. Now that's when they want the House to pass it, but it is looking like July, where they're hoping to have it all finalized and on the president's desk. But then they start running into other issues that they have to address, like the debt ceiling. So they definitely...
That would be... Yeah, July 4th would be fabulous. Olivia Beavers, thank you. Follow her on X America. I had a wild weekend. On Saturday morning, jumped on a plane, flew to Minneapolis, landed, got to the hotel, threw on my tie and coat, spoke, was so pleased. The banquet for the Minnesota Family Council was enormous. Great success for the Minnesota Family Council, for True North Legal. We talked at length. I did a speech, and then we had a panel of Jeff and everybody at Minnesota Family Council up on front. And the issue that dominated the night is Title IX and girls' sports being for girls. And I came back yesterday, flew back to the north, and en route, heard Ross Douthat talking to Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, who's been a guest on this show. Now, Ross is the New York Times columnist, and Chris Murphy sits down with Ross because he's a nice man. He's center right. Ross is a really good writer. And they have this exchange on girls and sports, cut number 17.
I don't have any fear of transgender athletes participating in sports, but
wait, just so you don't have any fear of it. Do you think it's if you had a daughter competing against a biological male, would you find it unfair?
I don't have girls, right? So I necessarily can't, right? I can't put myself in that position.
Have some empathy, right, for those of us who do, right? So would you find it unfair?
I mean, I've talked to lots of parents of girls in Connecticut who do not think it's unfair, and who think that the benefits that those athletes get from being part of a team is important, and they don't mind or feel threatened by the competition. I think everybody can come to their own conclusion, but your conclusion is the official line of liberalism right now. It's you're saying you don't. Yes, my conclusion is that I would support those athletes being able to participate in my community, right? In my community, but
all right, great.
But I would.
Great. Chris Murphy wants boys and girls sports. I can tell you, I talked to Renee, Rory, and Becca. I talked to everybody in Minnesota. This is a 90-10 issue. I used to say it's an 80-20 issue. It's a 90-10 issue. And I have great empathy for children experiencing gender dysphoria and their parents. I have great empathy as well for athletes who happen to be girls, their parents, their friends, family, and coaches, and they don't want to play against boys. They don't want to be injured by boys who are transitioning to girls. What adults do is up to adults, and adults are fine. But girls' spaces should be for girls. And the absurdity that Chris Murphy just said, I don't have any girls, so I'm not worried about it. That's just a gentle paraphrase. That's not the feeling. And the 3 Courage Awards that were given out by the Minnesota Family Council were given out to 3 girls who were very young teens to preteen for standing out and testifying in the Minnesota legislature that they want to play sports and they want their locker rooms to other girls and themselves. They want to win. They want to compete. One was a long-distance runner. Said, she just can't beat someone with testosterone until they got their beta blocker, whatever their testosterone suppressant is. And it's too late. It's just biology. And Renee called it a genesis issue. I love that terminology. It is a genesis issue. And that's what Democrats should be made to answer on the record, every single one, just like Ross pushed Chris. This is why you don't see Democrats talking to Republicans. Because a good Republican, a good conservative, a good center-right person will say to a Chris Murphy or somebody else, now really, boys who are transitioning, you want them in girls' locker rooms? And the answer is, well, maybe if it's not my girl. Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, it's a 90-10 issue. Does not work for most people. You know what works for me is ReliefFactor.com. Brought it with me. Got it right here. I've got enough for a couple of weeks left. Up here, I put out the bat signal for a resupply of ReliefFactor.com up north because I got to take it every day. Did 5 miles this morning. Beautiful, cold, chilly up here, and but bright and sunny. And oh wait, I didn't bring any water at all, so that's going to have to wait for the next segment. I don't take it dry. I don't have any water with me. So I will just tell you right now, I'll take it in hour number 2, because I always do it on air. So you can watch on the Salem News Channel if you're watching, or you can hear on the radio network or on one of our great affiliates, including you, WBOB, down in Jacksonville. I always take it in hour 1, but I forgot in the hocus pocus of moving studios and getting rearranged. I can show you the Relief Factor, but I can't take it without at least a sip of water. So I need a sip of water. We will be connecting shortly, I hope, with Dr. Michael Oren from Israel. President Trump has taken off on his Middle East trip, which will take him to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. I've taken off on my trip north to sort of ready Studio North for the summer. I'll be up here for a week, then I'm going back to Studio Beltway. Then I'm going on the Hillsdale College cruise. So, I didn't even know if they've got any berths left. HillsdaleCollegeCruise.com. I do want you to know Consumer Cellular works great up here, and I have made my switch to Consumer Cellular. You ought to investigate it as well. Give them a call, 1-800-411-4454. It's right there if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, 1-800-411-4454. You can have savings without sacrifice. The quality is perfect. You can keep your old number, or you can get a new one, or you can get a second number, which is what I did. And I want you to be aware that you can always get a second number and keep that for friends and family, or you can just take your old number and bring it over with you. The big deal about Consumer Cellular is that they don't want you to be paying ridiculous amounts of money for unlimited data from Big Cellular unless you have to do that. You should never pay more than $60 a month for 2 lines with unlimited data, because that's their offer to you. Consumer Cellular, if you're a big data user, or you've got a teenager who's a big data user, or a young adult living at home who's a big data user, or your spouse is a big data user, and you want unlimited data plans, make the switch to Consumer Cellular and save money, because they will give you 2 lines for $60, unlimited data, $60 a month. Second month free when you go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, H-U-G-H, or you call 1-800-221-76, 1-800-411-4454 and say, want to switch. By the way, you'll be talking to someone in America, and you'll be talking to them after a one-button push. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. And if you don't use a lot of data, if you're 50 years and older, and you're making a couple of calls a day and you're sending some texts, but you're not downloading movies and you're not playing video games, you don't need more than 8 gigs a month. Ask them about their absolute dirt cheap option, the 8 gigs a month option, because then save money. I'll bet you don't even know how much you're paying. I bet you don't know. If you don't know, you're paying too much. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Let me go back to President Trump before he left for the Middle East today. He had this to say about the Houthis, cut number 9.
We also, as you know, created a situation where the Houthis, for the first time ever, have ceased firing, and they've let it be known that they're not going to be firing at American ships anymore, not going to be firing at Americans anymore. This was a heavy barrage that lasted for approximately 50 days. And as you know, they've been in war essentially for forever. But over the last 10 years, they've been very difficult for other countries. Nobody was able to do what we did. But they stopped, and we take their word for it. Their surrogates and them directly said, we don't want to do this anymore. And so we were satisfied with that.
All right, let's also see what he had to say about China this morning, cut number 7.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs.
All right, and then he finally said this about India and Pakistan, cut number 10.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of 2 nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases. And having these, they really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade.
I'm glad that ceasefire happened. I do not think there will be a ceasefire in Gaza, but I'm joined by Dr. Michael Oren from Israel. Dr. Oren, what do you make of these stories that there is daylight between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu, both of whom have denied that there is any daylight?
Well, the question is, I think there's obviously daylight. The question is how much daylight. And, he mentioned the Houthis before, the president, and that they've resolved not to fire anymore at American citizens. I don't want to disabuse the president of the United States, but the Houthis actually are firing at American citizens, my family. And so, maybe they're not firing at ships, but they're certainly firing at Israelis. And a great number of those Israelis, about 250,000 of them, have American citizenship. So there's a daylight there. It's not huge. I understand that the president is of a country that's of a much larger one than ours and situated far from the Middle East and not threatened physically the way we are, certainly not threatened existentially the way we are, will have different interests. But it's a certain amount of daylight. I'm sure if you asked Israeli leaders whether Israel would have liked to have been included in that ceasefire with the Houthis, they invariably say yes. There's been daylight on the Iranian issue to various degrees. There's been daylight on the Saudi issue, whether the president will decouple Saudi nuclearization from the normalization with Israel, and perhaps maybe some daylight on Gaza as well.
Hold on a second. I'm going to talk with Dr. Oren during the break. I'll bring him back on the other side as well. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. So I'm back with Ambassador Oren. And Ambassador, I want to save our talk about Gaza until I return to the entire network. But I want to ask you about Idan Alexander's release today. There's a report in the Times of Israel that a third party mediated that. What is your understanding of what's going on with the hostages and what Hamas is trying to do or not do?
Well, first of all, it puts us in an impossible situation, Hugh, because on one hand, we have to celebrate the release of a hostage, of a soldier. Of course, it's a reason really to celebrate. On the other hand, we're reminded of the 20 plus other hostages who remain in unspeakable captivity. And then the question of simply sovereignty. What does it mean where the life of one Israeli is worth more because that person happens to have another passport, and particularly an American passport? And what is that going to say to Israelis who only have one passport, like me, because I had to give up my American citizenship in order to be ambassador? And so these are very, very complex issues. My guess is that the president wants to end the fighting, wants to see an end to the fighting in Gaza. He would like to see movement on the Saudi front. The Saudis have said that they can't negotiate with us toward normalization as long as there is fighting in Gaza. But it takes many to tango here, and it's Hamas. Hamas has been obdurate and has rejected formula after formula. Even Steve Witkoff said that they thought he said that he was duped by Hamas. Hamas has gained a lot from this. It didn't pay any price. It released Idan Alexander and received a sort of a public relations coup, and made the administration indebted to him. I hope they don't feel too indebted to Hamas. So extremely complex moment we're facing right tonight.
All right. Now, I also don't see any daylight. I talked to the president last week for a half hour on the air, and he asserted he's been, the best for Israel of any president. And he also went on to say Iran has two choices. They can dismantle their centrifuges nicely, or we can blow them up viciously. That's pretty clear. And by the way, he just hammered that, Ambassador Warren. I don't think they have a choice other than that choice.
I hope not, and I think Steve Witkoff also reiterated that on his Sunday morning talk shows, and that's very good news for us. Because when I said how much daylight, okay, there's going to be daylight. It's almost unavoidable. There's going to be daylight when you have, again, this huge country far away from the Middle East and the small country in the middle of the Middle East are going to have you can't have complete confluence of interests. I think generally the fact that the administration has given us unbridled support in fighting Hamas, unbridled support in
Hold
Lebanon,
on one second, Mr. Ambassador. Got to come back on the whole
Syria.
network. Hold on.
The Hugh Hewitt Show returns in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. Ambassador Michael Oren, former Israel ambassador to the United States, joins me. We were talking, as we went out of break, that there is not much daylight when it comes to Iran. There may be daylight when it comes to the Houthis. I wanted to go to Gaza because fighting did not stop. There is no ceasefire in Gaza. Some IDF troops were killed over the weekend. I heard a report that the Rafah brigade, such as is left of it, of Hamas, is in bad shape. I don't think there's a ceasefire. You think the United States is pressuring Israel to do a ceasefire?
I think listen, I can't adduce any hardcore evidence to this effect, but I think that the message coming out of Washington to Israel was, wrap it up, guys. You've been fighting for a very long time. We want to move on to other things. Those other things in particular would be a rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Either, cut a deal where you get all the hostages back, but you're going to have to withdraw your troops to the international border, and you're going to have to let Palestinians go back to where they were in the northern part of the Strip, or finish the military aspect of this quickly. And for Israel, of course, that's going to be difficult because moving quickly means you're endangering soldiers, but beyond that, it also means you're endangering hostages. So, here again, there may not be a total confluence of interests. It's extremely important that both sides maintain open channels of communication, because any difficulties we've had so far has really been about sort of a breakdown in communication between the two sides.
No, I really don't see that. But again, you're much closer to it because you're right there in Tel Aviv, and I'm sitting over here in the United States, very safe from all these things. But it seems to me that Donald Trump has brought everyone onto the same message vis-a-vis the biggest issue, which is Iran, and clearly communicated Iran has these two choices. What do you think Iran's going to do at this point, Mr. Ambassador?
There's no way Iran's going to dismantle its nuclear facilities. And, if you want to think out of the box, then the talks break down. I hope they break down sooner rather than later, because Iran will try to drag them out so they can rebuild their air defenses and run out the UN sanction snapback. It's supposed to expire in October. They'll try to drag it out. But if talks fail, then I think that Israel will get a green light to act with American support. And once we finish what we have to finish, then the Iranians will go back to the negotiating table.
So I'm going to keep you during the break, but let me put my proposition on the table, and then people can go hear his answer on YouTube. I think that the president's going to finish his Middle East trip. He's going to come home. The Iranian negotiations are going to collapse. Israel's going to go full tilt to finish the war in Gaza militarily, get as many of the hostages as it can back, and we're going to bomb Iran with Israeli help. That's what I think is going to happen. But then again, I thought the conclave was going to go for 3 months. So I gave you my prediction, Mr. Ambassador. What's yours?
One small correction. I pretty much agree with everything you said, Hugh. It's a little small correction. You said that the United States will bomb Iran with Israeli backing. I think it's more likely that Israel will bomb Iran with American backing.
Well, don't you think our B-2s are going to go? You haven't got bunker busters, and I really don't know enough about any. I don't know what you need to blow up their centrifuges, but I'm assuming our B-2s play a role in it, and that would mean at least co-equal status, right? If we're bombing Iran, they're going to be mad at us, and they're going to try and kill Americans. But they're trying to do that anyway.
Yeah, you might if you're going to be blamed for it, you might as well do it. But the fact is, these strategic bombers can drop 3 30,000-pound bombs from 50,000 feet in the air, and nothing can touch them. And they could do a bigger job than our F-15s, X-16s, and F-35s. We also know that those planes, when they took out Mr. Hasrallah Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon, they were able to cut through 60 feet of concrete to get to him. And that's just our planes. We have other capabilities. Remember those submarines? We have other capabilities. We have ground forces, special forces. We could do a tremendous amount of damage. And I think that is definitely a realistic possibility.
All right. So the most important question, all these other things pale in comparison if the Iranian regime were to fall. And I think they're getting pretty close. And I've heard a number of experts say the same thing, but you're a lot closer to all this than anybody else I know. What do you think? Is the Iran regime on shaky, after 49 years, ground?
Very shaky, very shaky. The economy's a mess. The schools don't have electricity. The factories don't have electricity. And things keep on going boom in the night if you keep on going in Iran. Various factories are blowing up, which means they don't have control of the security situation either. They're on the ropes, and we shouldn't let them get off the ropes. Now is the time to finish the KO. And that Iran is responsible for 99% of the bloodshed in this region. It's about time it stops.
Is there anyone in Saudi Arabia or the UAE who disagrees with that? I put Qatar in their own category, or gutter. But what about the Saudis and the Emiratis? They want the same thing, don't they?
I think they want two things. I think that they want quiet, and if they feel that the way to get quiet is to have a nuclear deal with Iran, they'll go with that. But they prefer to have no Iranian regime at all, clearly.
Does quiet also mean just finish the war quickly, but you don't have to go back to the border before the Hamas invasion?
Oh, I think they need that too, yeah. I think they understand this. Israel faces the twin existential threats that confront all of these governments in the Gulf. They're facing with Sunni extremism in the form of Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Shiite extremism in the form of Iran and Hezbollah. We're the only country in the Middle East that's actually fighting both of them. And of course, they want us to win. And if we do win, they're going to make peace with us. They're not going to make peace with us if we don't win and we're weak.
Yeah, that's so obvious to me. So I just think it's an important point to make again and again and again. Last question. I saw some speculation that the prime minister might want to bring about early elections before the ultra-Orthodox parties bolt on his coalition. True or false?
It's possible, but it's not just because of that. For example, if the administration comes to Israel and say, listen, here's the deal in Gaza, you pull your forces back, you let the Palestinians go back to their home, you get all the hostages back, and, Hamas is basically going to come out of the tunnels. Now, most Israelis would go along with that, but those Israelis are not in the Israeli government. And that, Netanyahu would not be able to accept that offer from the United States and retain his government. So we'd have to go to elections. So there are other precipitating factors which could lead to an early elections this summer.
I will look forward to more conversations with Dr. Michael Oren. In the meantime, you ought to follow him at Dr. Michael Oren and his Substack. He is also at the Wilson Center, where he is a senior fellow. Dr. Oren, thank you, as always, for bringing us up to speed. I appreciate it. Boy, did the market love what Donald Trump had to say today and what Scott Bessent, our Secretary of the Treasury, announced in Geneva, so much so that the NASDAQ went up more than 4%, entered bull market territory today. And this is all because, with a song and a dance, we've got a 10% base tariff in place around the world, which look, this is my own view on this, not anyone else's view. I don't know why President Trump wants the base tariff. I kind of view that as a tax on the world for our maintaining freedom of navigation through the United States Navy. And we did it for free forever. And NATO is, what they're spending on defense, they're spending to defend themselves. And what they're spending in Canada, which is not enough, they're defending kind of not much at all, but they're going to pick up the pace, according to Mark Carney. But Donald Trump put the 10% baseline in, and in my way of thinking, and it's just Hugh Hewitt's way of thinking, that's picking up part of the tab that we maintain freedom of the seas so that trade may go on all over the world. Well, the headline over at the Wall Street Journal is not only the market rally today, but that the United States collected $16.3 billion in customs duties in April. That helps pay the tab for the United States Navy maintaining freedom of navigation. That's how I view that. And China has very quickly come to accept the 10%, and that's good. Now, the president is on a plane headed to Saudi Arabia, then he's going to Qatar, then he's going to the United Arab Emirates. I just finished talking with Michael Oren last hour and this hour. Here's the conclusion of that interview, which continued into the space between last hour and this hour commercial broadcast, news, sports, weather, traffic. Here's what Dr. Oren had to say to me about my prediction that the president comes back from his trip, Israel finishes off Hamas, then jointly we take care of Iran. Here's what Michael had to say. So I gave you my prediction, Mr. Ambassador. What's yours?
One small correction. I pretty much agree with everything you said, Hugh. It's a little small correction. You said that the United States will bomb Iran with Israeli backing. I think it's more likely that Israel will bomb Iran with American backing.
Well, don't you think our B-2s are going to go? You haven't got bunker busters, and I really don't know enough about any. I don't know what you need to blow up their centrifuges, but I'm assuming our B-2s play a role in it, and that would mean at least co-equal status, right? If we're bombing Iran, they're going to be mad at us and they're going to try and kill Americans. But they're trying to do that anyway.
Yeah, you might if you're going to be blamed for it, you might as well do it. But the fact is, these strategic bombers can drop 3 30,000-pound bombs from 50,000 feet in the air, and nothing can touch them. And they can do a bigger job than our F-15s, X-16s, and F-35s. But we also know that those planes, when they took out Mr. Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon, they were able to cut through 60 feet of concrete to get to him. And that's just our planes. We have other capabilities. Remember those submarines? We have other capabilities. We have ground forces, special forces. We could do a tremendous amount of damage. And I think that is definitely a realistic possibility.
All right. So the most important question, all these other things pale in comparison if the Iranian regime were to fall. And I think they're getting pretty close. And I've heard a number of experts say the same thing. But you're a lot closer to all this than anybody else I know. What do you think? Is the Iran regime on shaky, after 49 years, ground?
Very shaky, very shaky. The economy's a mess. The schools don't have electricity. The factories don't have electricity. And things keep on going boom in the night if you keep on going in Iran. Various factories are blowing up, which means they don't have control of the security situation either. They're on the ropes, and we shouldn't let them get off the ropes. Now is the time to finish the KO. And that Iran is responsible for 99% of the bloodshed in this region. It's about time it stops.
Is there anyone in Saudi Arabia or the UAE who disagrees with that? I put Qatar in their own category, or gutter. But what about the Saudis and the Emiratis? They want the same thing, don't they?
I think they want two things. I think that they want quiet, and if they feel that the way to get quiet is to have a nuclear deal with Iran, they'll go with that. But they prefer to have no Iranian regime at all, clearly.
Does quiet also mean just finish the war quickly, but you don't have to go back to the border before the Hamas invasion?
Oh, I think they mean that too, yeah. I think they understand this. Israel faces the twin existential threats that confront all of these governments in the Gulf. They're facing with Sunni extremism in the form of Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Shiite extremism in the form of Iran and Hezbollah. We're the only country in the Middle East that's actually fighting both of them. And of course, they want us to win. And if we do win, they're going to make peace with us. They're not going to make peace with us if we don't win and we're weak.
Yeah, that's so obvious to me. So I just think it's an important point to make again and again and again. Last question. I saw some speculation that the prime minister might want to bring about early elections before the ultra-Orthodox parties bolt on his coalition. True or false?
Possible, but it's not just because of that. For example, if the administration comes to Israel and say, listen, here's the deal in Gaza, you pull your forces back, you let the Palestinians go back to their home, you get all the hostages back, and, Hamas is basically going to come out of the tunnels. Now, most Israelis would go along with that, but those Israelis are not in the Israeli government. And that, Netanyahu would not be able to accept that offer from the United States and retain his government. So we'd have to go to elections. So there are other precipitating factors which could lead to an early elections this summer.
I will look forward to more conversations with Dr. Michael Oren. In the meantime, you ought to follow him at Dr. Michael Oren and his Substack. He is also at the Wilson Center, where he is a senior fellow. Dr. Oren, thank you as always for bringing us up to speed. I appreciate it. Now, I will tell you, the market closed between that conversation 15 minutes ago and now. Dow went up 2.81%, S&P went up 3.26%, and the NASDAQ soared 4.35%. That's a bull market in the tech-heavy NASDAQ. The Wall Street Journal summarized the impacts of the announcement in Geneva that Secretary Bessent made about a framework of a deal with China. Number one, this is a much bigger than expected U-turn. Number two, trade war is far from over. The truce is going to last 90 days. Whether or not it reaches a full trade agreement remains to be seen. Three, the U.S. has not won concessions from Beijing yet. We're taking a lot more money from them, I would add, but that's not in the Wall Street Journal story. Number four, the U.S. will still buy a lot less Chinese stuff. And the journal is correct because there's a 40% tariff now on China, a 10% baseline China tariff. Everybody in the world is paying that. That's our freedom of the seas tariff in my mind. And then we're putting 30% on them about fentanyl. And that point number five, fentanyl tariffs are the focus now. Scott Bessent spoke to this. And number six is the Sell America trade is in question. That's trader talk, and I don't really care about trader. I'm not a trader. But people who trade stocks, they make up different deals that when they think there's going to be a good time to buy America or sell America, and they package different things. That's for people who watch business channels obsessively all day long in their computer screen and are looking for a quarter port margin. That's not you. You're here for the news. So let me tell you what Scott Bessent said about fentanyl today in Geneva. Cut number 13.
This does not include any sector-specific tariffs that have been put across all of our trading partners. And as the ambassador said, I think he would agree with me that the upside surprise for me from this weekend was the level of Chinese engagement on the fentanyl crisis in the United States. They brought the Deputy Minister for Public Safety, who is not traditionally part of the trade team or the negotiating team, and he had a very robust and highly detailed discussion.
Now, I'm glad to hear that. I don't believe him. The Chi-Coms have promised us fentanyl crackdown. They've sold us that rug 4 or 5 times. And in fact, Scott Bessent referenced that, cut number 14.
What has to happen is it has to be fair for the American people. But in January 2020, President Trump produced a template. We had an excellent trade agreement with China, and the Biden administration chose not to enforce it. The Chinese delegation basically told us that once President Biden came into office, they just ignored their obligations. So, we already have a large framework. The other thing to remember here, Jonathan, is that this is a pause down to 10%. The April 2nd level for China is 34%. So we will be working to see where their final reciprocal number ends up. And the negotiations are a combination of tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidies of labor and capital.
And stopping fentanyl. Joe Biden didn't do anything about that. They promised and promised. Now they're promising again. Let's wait and see whether they stop that. Joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton, who is chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He is also the conference chairman for the Republican caucus, making him the third-ranking Republican in the Senate. Senator Cotton, hope you had a great Mother's Day with Mrs. Cotton and that you got to talk to your mom. I'd like to say welcome and all that stuff, but I got to get to this Geneva deal. We have been sold a fentanyl rug by China 3 or 4 times. Do you believe them that they're going to actually crack down?
I think we should be skeptical, but borderline doubtful about whether they will crack down. I think that's one reason why the president and Secretary Bessent kept the 20% fentanyl tariff in place, and why we have a 90-day agreement, not an indefinite agreement. President Trump in his first term was the only president to get any movement out of communist China on fentanyl over the last 15 years by largely stopping its direct importation into the United States. But they just shifted tactics, starting to import it through Mexico and now shipping its chemical precursors and even pill presses into Mexico for it to be shipped to the United States. And of course, Communist China is a techno-totalitarian police state. They boast that they can identify any one of their subjects within seconds using their ubiquitous camera systems and artificial intelligence. So they obviously know what major chemical and pharmaceutical companies are up to if they want to, and therefore they could stop it. So I think it's something that we can hope they do, but I don't think we should expect them to do it without continued pressure.
Can we even know if they're doing it? Because it seems to me it's a very difficult trade to track, and the technology to do so in a closed country like China doesn't exist. Do you think we'll be able to verify, even if we want to enter into an agreement with them, that they've stopped the shipment of precursor chemicals?
We do have some techniques that we can use, Hugh. We don't have to rely just on the good graces and the say-so of Communist China. We obviously can cooperate with the Mexican government and their security services there. And some of the proof will simply be in the pudding, in the number of fentanyl and other opioid deaths we see in America, and also the amount of trafficking we see coming across the southern border. So it won't simply be a matter of relying on the good word of Communist China.
All right. Now, the president is en route to the Middle East right now. And much like his first trip abroad in his first term, his second trip, he went to the funeral of Pope Francis, was his first unscheduled trip. But now it's first scheduled trip to Saudi Arabia. He's not going to Israel. I don't read anything negative into that. As he told me on the show last week, he's as good as any president has ever been for Israel. Do you see any daylight between the president and Israel?
No, I don't. And the president has reiterated that, like you said, recently as last week on your show. Ambassador Huckabee in Israel also made the same point. Hugh, this is largely a economic and trade trip, and there's much more progress to be made on that front in the Gulf nations than there is in Israel, because we are already extremely close trading and financial partners with Israel, more so than we are with the Arab nations. So I'm sure there'll be some security and strategic questions addressed in Saudi Arabia and UAE and Qatar. But this is primarily a trade and finance trip, and there's more work to be done in the Arab nations there than there is with our very close friends and economic trading partners, the Israelis.
Now, Senator Cotton, you'll be driving home, I hope, by the time Patrick McGee joins me. He's going to come on and talk about his new book, Apple in China, which is fascinating. The subtitle is The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. They've been captured by the Chi-Com. It's really kind of disturbing, the degree of dependence upon Chinese permission slips and Chinese consumers that Apple has grown. They're addicted to basically the yuan. Have you followed this development? Are you as alarmed as Mr. McGee?
It is alarming, Hugh. There may be no American company that is more dependent on China than Apple. Certainly lots of companies, unfortunately, have dependencies on China for this or that kind of product or critical input or as an export market. But Apple has basically outsourced almost all of its production over the years to China. And although it has made some noises about trying to diversify out of China, Tim Cook has still been very explicit that Apple depends entirely on the entire ecosystem that Apple has helped, that Communist China has helped Apple create. Wish we could go back in time and make a lot of changes, not just with Apple, but with American policy that allowed American companies to do it in the first place. But Apple is heavily dependent on China, maybe more so than any other major American company.
Well, that's the argument McGee makes. He also makes the argument that what their alleged transfer to India is window dressing, that they're just taking 99% of the production in China, shipping it over to India for a little finishing touch. Then they send it to America and they say it's not a China product. And he persuaded me he's right. Now, I don't know much about this, but you should. I really don't think our leading tech company should depend upon Chinese whim. And they get $70 billion or $50 billion a year, between $50 and $70 billion a year in customer dollars from China, which I was unaware of until I read this book.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with every one of Apple's practices and how they're trying to avoid potential trade battles between the United States and China. But what you say is not surprising. Apple's not the only company that does that. We saw that a lot in the first term of people trying to get out of China. In reality, all they were doing was shipping stuff to a third country. But Apple's dependency, as you say, runs both ways. It's not just they produce so many of their iPhones and devices inside of China, but they have major sales inside of China, the way so many other American companies do.
Like the NBA. Last question, Senator. In news items this morning came a story from the diplomat.com and RAND that China is fielding an array of high-powered microwave weapons that emit electromagnetic pulses capable of disabling electronic systems. According to a RAND report, about 90% of HPM-related patents globally are owned by China-affiliated organizations, indicating continuing advances in precision and power of their HPM capabilities. These advanced weapon systems have become a critical component of China's informatized warfare strategy that guides its overall warfighting doctrine. Is this something you're read up on? I remember in 7 Things You Can't Say About China, you talked about how rapidly they're advancing their nuclear arsenal, but what about the EMPs?
I am familiar, Hugh, with the report and the alarm with which John Ellis carried it this morning, and I think John is right to carry it with some alarm. It's just one more example of the kind of cutting-edge weaponry and technology that China is building, all with really a singular goal, targeting the United States military in the Western Pacific and preventing our military from coming to Taiwan's aid should China try to go for the jugular in Taiwan.
Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Senator Cotton. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. You should be reading news items. I will read this later in the program to you in its entirety, but it's deeply alarming. I posted it on my X account. I'd encourage you to go and read it. It's item 7 in today's news items. If you've missed anything up to date, you're just tuning in, I'll post the key interviews over at my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Don't miss anything. It's important. Like Ambassador Orrin was both on and off the air twice with me today, and I just have now made a habit of, when we have to go to break down the network, I keep talking to guests and I put it over at YouTube, so you really ought to like and subscribe, Hugh Hewitt at YouTube, so you do not miss anything of the Hugh Hewitt Show. That music is the theme song from Dwayne's World, podcast by my senior producer, Generalissimo, who had Mother's Day yesterday. And Mother's Day is always difficult for spouses because you've got to worry about what you're going to, if you're on the myphdweightloss.com program, because you're trying to lose 50 pounds like Dwayne did, and then keep it off, 864-644-1900. That's
864-644-1900.
So you have Mother's Day to celebrate, and you either did it at Angel Stadium or Disneyland. Which of the two did you pick?
We actually went to dinner with the kids and went on a bike ride.
Did you go to Disneyland at all yesterday?
No, they both had shifts where they had to work because they both work for the Mouse. And then after their shift was over with, we went to dinner and went on a bike ride after that.
But you didn't go to Disneyland.
I did not.
So not what do they call those big long things that are sugary and cinnamon?
Churros?
Churros. You had no churros yesterday?
No, I don't normally have churros even when I do go there.
Well, that's because you're on myphdweightloss.com.
Even before that was never my vice.
Oh, I love churros.
That may have been your vice.
It's my vice. So what did you have where did you take the fabulous
Cheesecake Factory.
Co-senior producer? Where?
Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, that's not good for myphdweightloss.com.
It's not the best, no.
So 864
644.
Are you having mild episodes? 864
644
1900. I'm just wondering if you're stuttering or something. So at the Cheesecake Factory, what said food did you have that was compliant with myphdweightloss.com?
I had what's called a bacon cheeseburger.
What's that?
Well, as the name suggests, it's a cheeseburger with extra bacon on it.
But is there a bun involved?
Yes, sadly there is.
Oh, so you departed from the My PhD weight loss. I hope you're being better today.
I'm not in the weight loss division now. I'm in the maintenance division.
Well, that's not maintaining much other than the need to go back to the weight loss division.
Well, I'm on the weight loss today and tomorrow for probably the rest of the week to pay for it.
I know. That's really. But was it good?
It was delicious.
All right. So when you go off on a binge like that, did you just throw caution to the wind and have cheesecake at the Cheesecake Factory?
I did not eat cheesecake at the Cheesecake Factory. We went on a bike ride and went to the frozen yogurt.
Okay, you're not getting one past me. My PhD weight loss does work. He did lose 50 pounds, and you can have days like that with myphdweightloss.com.
But you got to get there first. You got to be disciplined to get there first.
Yeah, but that takes 3 months. Then you're good. Then you can go off the trail and go crazy on Mother's Day, and then just get back on it.
Yeah,
on an electric scooter. No response there. Okay. I want to read my Ellis items. I was referring in whole to what Senator Cotton said. Yeah, I got time. In 2017, China began fielding an array of high-powered microwave, HPM, weapons that emit electromagnetic pulses, EMPs, capable of disabling electronic systems. According to a RAND report, about 90% of HPM patents globally are owned by China-affiliated organizations, indicating continued advances in the precision and power of their HPM capabilities. These HPMs can be fitted onto land vehicles, aircraft, naval vessels, and cruise missiles. Additionally, China's high-altitude electronic magnetic pulse, HEMP, a nuclear warhead delivered with a missile that emits waves of EMPs when detonated above a target arsenal, is set to expand as China pursues an ambitious nuclear modernization program aimed at doubling its nuclear arsenal by 2035. Both HPM and HEMPs are capable of disabling or destroying electronic equipment integrated into practically every sort of critical infrastructure, placing essential services such as water purification, hospitals, telecommunications, and transportation at risk of paralysis. These advanced weapon systems have become a critical component of China's informatized warfare strategy that guides its overall warfighting doctrine. According to the Science of Military Strategy, one of the Central Military Commission's core strategic documents. Under this strategy, China seeks to dominate the cyber and electromagnetic domain by quickly disabling essential military and civilian electronic systems. So don't get too excited about a trade deal with China. They'll do a trade deal with us, but they're not demilitarizing. They're not interested in all of us, let's grow prosperous together. They are interested in dominating the world. Don't forget it. And I guess Jimmy Lai did not come up in the talks today because it wasn't mentioned by Secretary Bessent in Geneva today. I'm coming back with Vic Mattis of Getting Hammered and the Washington Free Beacon next. We talk Leo next. So pleased to welcome back Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon, co-host of Getting Hammered fame. Hello, Vic. How are you?
Hello, Hugh. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I want to give you props because on the most recent edition of Getting Hammered, you said the conclave, which I believe was taped on Wednesday night or afternoon, you said the conclave would be over by Friday. And you're the only on-air voice I heard. Dwayne thought it would be a quick conclave, too. But, I mean, you really nailed that. I thought it was going to be a month-long deal till they could come together. So, A, kudos. B, I had like 10 Jews and Mary Catherine on Friday after Pope Leo got named. So I had no Catholics to talk with. What do you think of Leo?
No guidance there. No, thank you for having me on. That's right. I called it. I said Friday, but that was what my sources had told me. I think that if we were going to go on for about a month, that would be like the church in crisis. Again, there was 133, my understanding, cardinals who were voting. And after the first day, I believe this is according to, Cardinal Dolan, who said people started asking him, right? Questo Robert Prevost, right? They're asking, what do you think of this guy? And that's when he started thinking it's going to be him, because Francis had put him in a prime spot. Despite being an American, he put him in a prime spot to be a possible pope, because they don't know everybody, but they all do know these people in prime positions, these cardinals. I'm very hopeful, Hugh. On the one hand, I do believe he is going to continue some of the legacy of Pope Francis, but that what I'm talking about there is care for the poor. Sure, he's, focused on climate change and he loves all the migrants. Okay, that's fine. We know where he's coming from. On the other hand, I think there is going to be reconciliation with conservatives in the church, particularly when it comes to, I hope, being able to practice the Latin Mass. He's a very modest man. Not a lot of people in the United States in the clergy actually knew him. So when people were asking Cardinal Dolan what he thinks about, Cardinal Prevost, he knew of him, but he didn't know him. And so we're discovering these things. But everything that I've heard, I think is very promising, even based on the vestments he wore, to the things that he's said since and singing the Regina Coeli. I think it's all good things.
Now, Vic, if I ask you right now, you're a Catholic school kid, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You can sing Ave Maria, or you can sing Hail Holy Queen enthroned above. You can sing all the hymns that we learned, right? So he's a product. He's my age. I mean, he's 6 months older than me. So he's a product of American culture, 60s and 70s. I bet you he knows the Gilligan's Island theme song, Green Acres. I would love to know what his teenage album collection was. He's basically an American kid. You can't take that. I mean, you can take the kid out of America and put him in Peru, but you can't take America out of the kid. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think a lot of Americans are very excited about finding out things like, oh, he was at the White Sox game during the World Series in the early 2000s, for example. Or, oh, here's a picture of him at this local pizza place. And people are very excited because he's an American. We haven't had this in 2,000 years. He's only the second English-speaking pope the church has ever had in its 2,000 years history, the other one being Adrian IV, who was English. This is very exciting. People are saying, oh, there's no question, he listened to this song, or he read these books, or he watched these shows. This is a great time for us. I think it's invigorating, and it brings more people, I think, who are interested in the church, a greater awareness. And I've been hearing about all sorts of people very excited about this who aren't even Catholic. I mean, you just mentioned it yourself on the previous shows.
Yeah, oh yeah. Everybody kind of wait and see. He's new and he's relatively young, so that's good. I will reserve judgment on what kind of pope he is until after. I just put up a column over at Fox News, and my editors did not like my title, which was the Wonder Years Pope, named for that show about being a kid in the '60s. They retitled it, Will Pope Leo XIV Reverse the Anti-American Vibe from the Last Pope? That's fine. That'll probably get more clicks. They're interested in people reading the thing. And I like the Wonder Years Pope because that's what I think of him as. But I do think he's going to be able to tell us with his first couple of consistories, there'd better be Cardinal Gomez at the end of that. And I would love to see Cardinal Chaput, because the last Pope just did not like America. And there's no getting around it. He did not like us.
That's right. As you know, he was from Argentina, but he was not of the Javier Milei persuasion of Argentinians, as you know. He was very much of a socialist background, pretty much an anti-capitalist, and saw the very dark side of capitalism in a lot of things that the United States had been doing and its approach. And that became very difficult, I think, to deal with and to reconcile for certainly a lot of Catholic Americans, I think. As you mentioned previously, Hugh, the younger generation of those who are interested in Catholicism are more traditional and more conservative leaning. They're not into 12-string guitars and, tambourines at Mass. They want the seriousness. They want the mystique. They like the incense, smells and bells. So it is promising that you're having a shift from this South American to this North American. And you're right. Again, he does have the support I saw of Cardinal Burke. So again, it's promising.
Yeah, he also, I was having lunch where you and I last had lunch, and someone came over to me and said, the new Pope is a cardinal from Chicago. And I about had a heart attack because I thought he meant Kupich, who, God bless him, is a lefty. And I just thought that's a disaster. And this guy does not strike me as a disaster. He strikes me, if you're a child of the 60s, Vietnam's in the back mirror. It's not in the front mirror. And Leo XIII was big on property rights and down on the communists. He was not pro-socialist. And people are getting this all mixed up. He was for working people, but that's what popes should be. I'm pretty interested to hear this, but do you think he has an album collection, or do you throw that away?
I think he has to have an album collection somewhere, and probably on vinyl. That would be really impressive. I'm not sure what he listens to, but again, he's us. He's an American. I mean, you call it the Wonder Years. He's like the Fred Savage of popes. That's kind of exciting.
I think
see.
he is the Fred Savage of popes. I absolutely no.
Yeah.
We got people out there. Vic, can you stay with me through the break? I got to go to a break here. I want to ask you a couple more. I haven't had a Catholic to talk to. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt isn't Catholic. I haven't had a Catholic to talk to about this. So you're my first Catholic that I can kind of clink glasses with. In fact, I addressed about 1,000 Protestants over the weekend. So I get a little Catholic talk. We made a Hail Holy Queen enthroned above. I bet you Vic knows the lyrics of that. When I was growing up, priests would come to dinner, and they would also hand out report cards. They were serious figures. They were preceded by order and reverence, but they liked to have a drink. They liked to play golf, and with the grown-ups, they would relax. The child abuse scandals really scarred the reputation of many, many good men. Do you think Leo's aware of that, and will he speak to it directly from the See of St. Peter?
I really hope so, because we can no longer have this situation that started really, obviously it's been for, centuries, or how long we don't know, but it became very well documented beginning in the 60s and the 70s, and certainly post-Vatican II, about these sex abuse scandals where priests were, not only did they commit terrible crimes, but they got moved around from, parish to parish, rather than being dealt with forcibly and promptly and being expelled or bringing them to justice. I do hope that Pope Leo XIV does address this very clearly, because we can't have any of this moving around anymore. I hope he deals with, I think the toughest thing he's going to be dealing with is the Vatican Bank. That's a mess. And then, of course, dealing with China. We almost had Cardinal Parolin as the next Pope, I think. That would have made it very complicated. I think he was a runner-up. I don't know for sure, though.
I think he was the leading guy on the odds, but you have sources that I don't have. I just sit back and wait. I'd never even heard of Prevost. I had never heard of him. And I read all this stuff beforehand, but I'm excited that someone from my cultural milieu, I want him to evangelize North America. I want him to evangelize in American English and tell people the gospel isn't a nice story. It's real. And I think he's going to be very effective at that. Do you think he'll do a lot of American media?
I certainly hope so, and I certainly hope he comes to the United States at some point. I imagine that before he comes to the United States, probably the president will go over there first. If you were to ask me right now what's going to happen first. But again, he's 67. He's got many years, God bless and God willing, to go. But when he comes
Vic,
here,
I said he's older than I am.
crazy.
I'm 69. You're not counting right. Vic Mattis of the Free Beacon, also co-host of Getting Hammered, and I cannot wait to hear him talk with Mary Catherine on Getting Hammered about Leo XIV. Here's my exit question for you, Vic. I mentioned in my column, do you think he will elevate at least Archbishop Gomez? It's the biggest archdiocese in America, and Archbishop Gomez is from Mexico, and he's a naturalized United States citizen. But that's very American. And Archbishop Chaput, who's retired now as Archbishop of Philadelphia, he's a Native American. Do you think they'll get their red hats?
Yeah. I hope so. As you know, there's a real opportunity here under Pope Francis. You hate to make a political comparison, but it's sort of like filling in the benches for judges, certainly at the appellate level, and setting them up for the Supreme Court. So there's something similar that can happen here under the reign of Leo XIV. If he gets a chance, that would be great for Gomez. And I'm with you on this. With Chaput. And also, I felt the same way when I heard it's somebody from Illinois. My first thought was, no, please, I don't think it's Kupich, please.
No, please. Okay, we would have prayed for the new pope if it had been Cardinal Kupich, but he was from left field, from Francis, a gift. It was airmailed to American Catholics who are more traditional, thumbing his nose at us, right? I don't think non-Catholics quite understand how the last pope was anti-Catholic. Last word, not anti-American.
Yeah.
He really didn't like us.
That's right. And again, just, some food for thought as we're moving forward here is to just remember that Robert Prevost is the man that he was, and again, as other people have said, Leo the 14th is now the man who he is, representing 1.4 billion of us, Hugh. And he may take a different approach or tack further in one direction or the other. We don't know. And the best that we can do is offer our prayers.
Yeah, offer our prayers and watch the first consistory. Vic Mattis, thank you. Follow him on X at Victorino Mattis, and make sure you like and subscribe to Getting Hammered so you can be entertained, as I was this morning. And Vic's got great sources in the Vatican, which I really can't believe, but he called it. Thank you, Vic. I also want to remind you,
Thanks,
food
Hugh.
for thought. How about food for your body? Relief Factor. I opened it last hour, but I didn't have any water. And I went up and got a Trader Joe's water from the fridge. And I tell you right now, Relief Factor works. So I'm taking it right now. And every studio needs two things. They need a little mini fridge of Trader Joe's waters and Relief Factor. And the Relief Factor bag looks like this. They changed it from the old bag that I have in Studio Beltway, but I've got my Relief Factor. I brought this up to Studio North with me. As I explained, Relief Factor has 4 ingredients: Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. That's the only supplement that I have taken for more than 20 years, and I've been taking it for 10 years. Did my 5 miles this morning in the crisp New England air, and I feel great because Relief Factor went with me back and forth. I don't recommend flying to Minnesota on a Saturday and flying back on a Sunday. But if you've got to do it with Relief Factor so you feel good about the dreaded overhead bag and you're happy when you're done with your quick out and back trips. Relief Factor, $19.95, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com, get the starter pack for $19.95. I'm joined by Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. Hello, Admiral. How was your weekend?
It was great, sir. I just got back from an extended trip in Ukraine and just caught up on a little bit of sleep last night.
Oh, that's a tough number of time zones to go through. Let's start with Ukraine then. Are we continuing to ship weapons to them and the supplies that they need?
We are shipping what was previously distributed and ordered, from what I could tell. Most importantly, we're providing intelligence support. And while the Ukrainians are a little bit confused by the back and forth on things within the administration, they still remain deeply grateful and appreciative of the assistance we provided. And we really are the backstop. When you look at our $30+ billion worth of gear that's on the ground there or been expended there, I mean, we have been the determinative factor, along with Ukraine's own, societal resilience and the strength of their military over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I had Ambassador Marakova on last week, and she always begins by saying thank you and ends that way, but sometimes it's confusing to listen to American voices for whatever reason, not be other than 100% with Ukraine, even as we look for a peace. Now, Admiral, I sent you, and I don't know if you had a chance to look, at this morning's news items from John Ellis had number 7, updating everyone on China's electromagnetic pulse weaponry, including its advanced high-altitude electromagnetic pulse nuclear warhead, and a RAND report about this. I've known about EMPs forever, but I didn't worry about them. I did not know that China owned 90% of the patents on EMP stuff. Did you?
Yeah, and I think there's 2 things here, sir. In the stuff you sent me and in my reading on it, and this is a known. This is should not be a surprise to us. One's the high-powered microwaves, which are kind of a tactical tool, which they're absolutely, they've got 90% of the patents, as you said, and they are streaking to completion of a whole lot of systems that I think could have a very significant battlefield impact for all our services, but particularly the ground forces and the maritime forces. This is a very tricky weapon and very difficult for us to counter. Separate from that, related, is the HEMP, the high altitude electromagnetic pulse, which is more of a strategic weapon because, like, if it was fired at us, we would think, boy, someone just fired an ICBM at us, and it might really kick off the big one. But it could be used over Taiwan and, be launched from a DF-17, which is a typical weapon you would see fired at Taiwan in a conflict. And that is that kind of civilization killer, is what a philosopher called it once, the idea that it, takes down all the electrical systems in a very large area around a burst that happens about 20 to 50 kilometers up in the air.
Well, that's also a worldwide depression weapon. Because if you do that to Taiwan, don't you launch a worldwide depression because of TSMC? Or TMSC?
So, yeah, I think, yeah, again, the high-powered microwaves you could use tactically as part of to minimize the damage in Taiwan, probably actually a benefit. The long-term kinetic damage. The hemp, you're exactly right. I mean, no one's coming back from that quick. And I don't know what it would do. You know, those individual semiconductor manufacturing equipment, the tools that are inside a high-end TSMC fabrication facility, they cost $150 million a piece. You start damaging them. I don't know how you repair them. I don't know the difficulty. I don't know what happens to the German lenses in there. And no one does, because no one's taking a $150 million piece of gear out and hemp testing it. But my guess is not good things are going to happen. And you're right, it's going to have a deleterious effect on the global economy. Now, I will say a significant Taiwan event in general is going to have a deleterious effect on the world economy.
Now, Admiral, the second question that was raised by this report by Rand and thediplomat.com is, do these weapons work on underwater platforms? So would our submersibles and our submarines be vulnerable to these weapons?
Well, first, many of our submarines and submersibles have antennas that come up at times, and they would certainly be subject to this. I think to the degree that the U.S. Navy's done any of the testing on that, it would be pretty highly classified.
All right. Now, do you think that DARPA is working on I hope we don't patent our most deadly weapon systems, right? That's what I thought. Well, those are the patents. What are they not telling us about? I don't want to patent our weapon systems. I don't want anyone to know about them. Do we have stuff like this?
So first, I wasn't aware there's a patent gap. I'm not sure there is, because for the exact reason you said. Well, first of all, I do want to give a shout out. Newt Gingrich is on about a 25-year jihad on this issue that we've got to take it more seriously. So again, this is not an unknown unknown. Don Rumsfeld would not be surprised. This is a known challenge coming. So do we have we have HPM systems, high-powered microwave systems? I don't think we've been as successful as them. I mean, I got to be careful. I'm reading reports like you're reading reports. Now, I tend to trust some of the sources I'm seeing here, that they've made some breakthroughs in how you use and the efficacy of high-powered microwave as a weapon. I think we've been all of our directed energy programs, and this is a variety of a directed energy program. All of our directed energy programs have been disappointing in their pace of development, whether they're at DARPA or the services. So yes, we have programs. No, I don't think we have programs that are at the pace that's alleged that this Chinese program has established.
All right, now I want to turn to, at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to talk with the author of this book, Patrick McGee. The book is called Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. It's very disturbing, Admiral, because its thesis in a nutshell is China owns Apple, not us. The Apple shareholders might get profits, but China owns it because they couldn't disengage if they wanted to. What do you think of that thesis?
I do think there are a number of companies and emerging technologies that have had market capture done by the Chinese. And with a company, it's a little different. It's how the workforce develops, how you work certain issues. With an emerging technology, it's when China literally invests in its own state-owned enterprise and drives the Americans and the other Western companies out with unfair pricing. That's what we saw with Huawei and 5G. We've seen it with a company called Heisai and LiDAR. So that's one method of championing themselves. The second one's what this book is about, which is where they capture the company. They're both, this is probably less bad than the driving us out, because we see now with 5G, it's ubiquitous throughout, the whole Southern Hemisphere. With LiDAR, those are those kind of sensors that are in a Tesla, an automated vehicle. It's very hard for us to find them for our military gear because our companies are driven out. So both of these issues bother me, Hugh. Probably the overall market capture one of an emerging technology bothers me more. The Apple one is more, at some point, if they want to take advantage of that to force concessions from Apple on access to data and things like that, they can probably get it.
All right, so Admiral, in a 2-minute summary, what is the strategic aim of Xi Jinping? What does he want?
Well, I think he wants Taiwan to bend to Beijing's will. I think that's the biggest. There's a number of outstanding issues they have out there. That's the one that I think he has on his bingo card for completion before I leave. So how do you do that? That's why he works so many angles. He works that kind of most dangerous scenario of having his military ready for a cross-strait invasion or a blockade. But he also works this kind of most likely scenario where he tries this cyber-enabled wargaming or campaigning. The hemp is part of that. The HMP is part of that. The cyber activities are part of that. Taking over LNG or energy. So his aim is to drive Taiwan as a public societal decision to bend the knee to China and be integrated in under initially a two territories, one system, but eventually a singular entity.
And then, Admiral, after that, what does he want? I just don't know how they could possibly want more than they've got right now. They've got everything that they want right now. They're only two superpowers. We're one of them. They're the other one.
Yeah, and I think they have a vision where there's one, and it's not us in their vision. But for sure, what they'd like is us out of the Western Pacific. They would like to have a sphere of influence that includes Japan, Korea, Taiwan.
Well, we will continue to talk about this, Admiral Mark Montgomery. Thank you so much. I appreciate always your checking in, especially after a long trip like that, and especially to talk about serious subjects like these. Thank you, Admiral. I really would encourage you to head over to foxnews.com or Google Fox News and Hugh Hewitt and get my latest column on Pope Leo XIV. I call him the Wonder Years Pope for the Fred Savage Wonder Years show, which ran from 1988 to 1994. You may not remember it if you're younger than that. But it was about being a kid in the 60s. So Pope Leo XIV is about half year older than I am. The culture he grew up in is the culture of Jaws and Steven Spielberg and Close Encounters and Gilligan's Island and Green Acres. Bad TV, great movies, lots of music, and music where albums existed on vinyl. He's got to have a vinyl record collection in a garage somewhere unless he sold it to give to the poor. His Amanda can't order. And I'm very hopeful that his initial choices of very traditional gear and living quarters telegraphs a return to tradition and to just not being anti-American. I just will settle for that. So the title that my editors at Fox uses, Will Pope Leo XIV Reverse the Anti-American Vibe from the Last Pope? It is not anything anyone ever expected, and it's going somewhere nobody knows. That's my subtitle. My original title was The Wonder Years Pope. I think they must have assumed no one knew what that was. But I would like you to read it and send it around and just get the understanding this is an American. He's been in Peru. He's got a heart for the poor, a heart for the immigrant. So does pretty much every Catholic prelate I've ever known. And I believe very, very much that the preference for the poor that's part of the Catholic faith is a continuity, not an aberration. And the preference for the stranger is a continuity, not an aberration. But being anti-American is an aberration, and you really can't afford that, or you end up with not only estrangement, you can end up with schism after a while, and we don't need that. One of my cheeky friends reminded me the last Augustinian he knew about was Martin Luther. And look, Augustinians have been around for a long, long time, and they are millions of good ones. And I would assume millions, maybe it's only hundreds of thousands over the centuries, because they are centuries old. But it's a mendicant order. And so he's a good man, obviously, a very good man, and I can't wait to have him visit America. Maybe he's doing interviews. Anyone listening, got friends in the Vatican, this is the right place to come. We had the president and the vice president last week. I can only do better by getting the Pope. So hopefully, speaking of the president, I have not said a word about the plane from Qatar because I think it's a nonsense story. I do not think it's a nonsense story that we cannot seem to finish Air Force One 2.0, actually Air Force One 3.0, and that Boeing, for whatever reason, cannot finish it and can't get it done. So Qatar offers us a plane that's not being used by the Qatars right now, Qataris, whatever we call them. And Donald Trump gets a question about that in the Roosevelt Room gaggle this morning. Long cut number 4.
On Qatar, has Qatar asked for anything in exchange for that $400 million luxury jumbo jet? And how can the American people be so sure that they will not in the future?
Well, I think what happens with the plane is that, we're very disappointed that it's taking Boeing so long to build a new Air Force One. We have an Air Force One that's 40 years old. And if you take a look at that compared to the new plane of the equivalent, stature at the time, it's not even the same ballgame. You look at some of the Arab countries and the planes they have parked alongside of the United States of America plane. It's like from a different planet. And it's close to 40 years old, might be more than 40 years old now. And we, when I first came in, I signed an order to get it built. I took it over from the Obama administration. They had originally agreed. I got the price down much lower. And then when the election didn't exactly work out the way that it should have, a lot of work was not done on the plane because a lot of people didn't know. They made change orders that were so stupid, so ridiculous. And it ended up being a total mess, a real mess. And when I came back, I said, by the way, what's going on with the Boeings that are coming in? Well, sir, they're way behind. And they are. They're way behind. They were way behind. Another mess that I inherited from Biden. And it's going to be a while before we get them. And I think Qatar, who has really, we've helped them a lot over the years in terms of security and safety. I think they, and very, very nicely, and I have a lot of respect for the leadership and for the leader, Qatar. And I think they knew about it because they buy Boeings. They buy a lot of Boeings. And they knew about it. And they said, we would like to do something. And if we can get a 747 as a contribution to our Defense Department to use during a couple of years while they're building the other ones, I think that was a very nice gesture. Now, I could be a stupid person and say, oh, no, we don't want a free plane. We give free things out. We'll take one, too. And it helps us out because, again, we're talking about we have 40-year-old aircraft. The money we spend, the maintenance we spend on those planes to keep them tippy-top is astronomical. You wouldn't even believe it. So I think it's a great gesture from Qatar. I appreciate it very much. I would never be one to turn down that kind of an offer. I mean, I could be a stupid person and say, no, we don't want a free, very expensive airplane. But I thought it was a great gesture. And I think it was a gesture because of the fact that we have helped and continue to, we will continue to, all of those countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and others, we keep them safe. If it wasn't for us, they probably wouldn't exist right now. And I think this was just a gesture of good faith.
All right, so then media is not satisfied. Someone comes around again, cut number 11.
Mr. President, what do you say to people who view that luxury jet as a personal gift to you? Why not leave it behind?
You're ABC fake news, right?
Why not?
Only ABC, well, a few of you would. Let me tell you, you should be embarrassed asking that question. They're giving us a free jet. I could say, no, don't give us, I want to pay you $1 billion or 400 million or whatever it is. Or I could say, thank you very much. There was an old golfer named Sam Snead. Did you ever hear of him? He won 82 tournaments. He was a great golfer. And he had a motto, when they give you a putt, you say, thank you very much. You pick up your ball and you walk to the next hole. A lot of people are stupid. They say, no, I insist on putting it. And then they putt it and they miss it. And their partner gets angry at them. You know what? Remember that, Sam Snead. When they give you a putt, you pick it up and you walk to the next hole and you say, thank you very much.
Respectfully, sir, as a businessman.
All right, I did not see Sam Snead coming. All right, I can remember barely Sam Snead. I don't remember him. I do remember, though, taxcutnow.com. Taxcutsnow.com. That's plural. Taxcutsnow.com. Our sponsor, Job Creators Network. I'm going to be hammering this for the next 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe until I go to on the Hillsdale College cruise. I'm going to be telling you about taxcutsnow.com, and I'll tell you why. Because we need them, and we need them soon. All right. I know everyone's staking out their ground, and they're doing their negotiating in public, and they're talking all over the place. All that most of us want is certainty in our lives. We want to know what the rules are, and we want the taxes we are paying now not to go up. Taxcutsnow.com. Go there, be a part of it. All of the groups are in on this. Job Creators Network leading the way, great sponsor of this program, and I love the idea of a very simple message, taxcutsnow.com. As promised, I'm joined by Patrick McGee. He is the author of this brand new book, Apple in China, the capture of the world's greatest company, and fascinating it is indeed. Hello, Patrick. How are you?
I'm good, Hugh. What is it? Morning Grace. It's Morning Glory, Evening Grace. It's been a while.
Morning Glory, Evening Grace. Well done. I want to begin with page 360 of Apple in China, where you reference what might be the worst 45 seconds in Tim Cook's life. Let's play that for the audience so they can see what you're talking about there. And these 45 seconds
the Chinese
were filmed
people's
originally
right
by
to
Fox
protest?
News. Go ahead, Harley, and run with that tape while I talk to Patrick. And that's Vaughn.
Protesting COVID lockdowns. Do you regret restricting airdrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government? Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
Well, these are all legitimate questions, Patrick. Did he ever get around to answering them?
No, never. And, I had conversations with Apple's PR team at the time, and they said, well, look, you can't doorstop a CEO and expect them just to answer on the spot. And I said, okay, fair enough. What are the answers? And they still wouldn't answer them. So that sort of tells you everything. Well, I mean, this is the CEO of what I call the world's greatest company, and he's unable to answer pretty basic questions. I mean, certainly questions that any American would take for granted, right? In terms of like basic human rights and being able to protest and things like that. And it's just a really revealing episode of how tied or bound to Beijing's fate the world's greatest company has become. And so it's a really revealing episode.
Patrick, I normally don't do books about corporations. And that's because it's hard for you, the author, to keep up with events that are happening. Like today, there's a deal between China and the United States, which will no doubt have a great deal of impact on Apple, and so books are overtaken. But I don't think yours will be, because there's a fundamental issue here that doesn't really go to whether or not the trade deal is good for Apple or bad for Apple. It's whether or not we want our biggest company, our most innovative company, perhaps the paradigmatic company for America, to be that deeply intertwined with China. Isn't that the bottom issue?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, most corporate histories don't have geopolitical consequences. This one does. The other thing is that, at least in my publicist's eyes, the book itself is going to be a news event, because I think I'm really uncovering, just what a political player Apple has been. Because, what people confuse is they think Apple just does these great designs and that capable factories in China know what to do. They take the orders and they build them. That's not the case at all. Apple has been sending for a quarter century America's top engineers by the literal plane load to build those capacities in China. And it's the only place it's been building those capacities. So Apple isn't just dependent on expertise that it found in China. It's become dependent on expertise it created in China.
Now, last week I talked to both the President of the United States and the Vice President. China came up in both of them. And the problem with China is a problem that everyone of my generation inherited. We fell for the Deng Xiaoping, hide your strength and move forward. In the meantime, Xi Jinping is not at all shy about his strength. But we thought actually China would evolve. China did not evolve. They simply captured the WTO. Did they also capture China in that process? Apple in that process?
Yeah, the subtitle of the book is The Capture of the Greatest Company. So absolutely they did. Yeah, I mean, the only maybe distinction I make versus some revisionist authors writing today is I think we're not sympathetic to the view that was taking place in the late 1990s and early 2000s. I don't view people that had that narrative as acting in bad faith. Some people now say, oh, it was just Western capitalists out for greed or something. I think there really was an American consensus and an evidence-based consensus. If you look at, say, Taiwan, right, which was under martial law for decades and then became a thriving democracy. And I think a reason they did is because they did build a middle class. You know, they were instrumental in building things like the IBM PC and the whole PC boom in the 80s and 90s, you know, where commerce doesn't cross borders, armies do. That was the mentality. And we sort of built this, interdependent world that we call Pax Americana, and it worked out really well. The arrogant decision that was erroneous in retrospect, but I think worthy of, there's it was a merit-based argument at the time, was that we could do for China what we did for Taiwan. That clearly proved to be wrong. And it's unclear if China was ever going to go in the direction of democracy.
It's what we also did for South Korea, that we did for post-war Europe, that we did wherever we intertwined capitalism. Capitalism won, but not in China. I'm joined by Patrick McGee, the author of this book, Apple in China to Capture the World's Greatest Company. And in 9 minutes, Patrick, I want to cover 8 things. So it's going to be kind of rushed. Number one, the India fallback strategy. Is it working? Is Apple able to build a parallel company in India in the event that everything goes to hell with China?
If that's how you define it, it's absolutely not working. If you are defining it as avoiding tariffs slapped on China, then it is working. And I think that's the only attempt that they're making right now. If you're looking for a bifurcated supply chain that's taking place in India, Apple is not doing that. Apple should be doing that, although it risks the ire of Beijing if they do. But if it takes 1,000 steps to build an iPhone, the final step is now in India. Hooray, you've avoided tariffs. You haven't done a thing to de-risk from China.
All right, and then that's a bad thing. Number two, TSCM vulnerability, which I found fascinating, not just vulnerability to invasion, but also vulnerability to earthquake and seismic events, which are inevitable, though not predictable. Tell me a little bit about how they de-risk the TSMC vulnerability.
Well, at least there are steps being made there by building in Arizona, but that too is a little more hype than it is substance, or at least if it's substance, it's going to take a long time, right? Chris Miller, author of Trip War, is fond of saying that fabricating semiconductors is the most complex thing that humans have ever done. And so the idea that we're just going to move that from Taiwan in a matter of, months or years to Arizona is kind of fanciful, but I'm a big supporter of the CHIPS Act. I really do think it needs to be done. I mean, it's just deeply irresponsible. I quote someone in the book saying it's borderline malpractice for Apple to have basically all CPUs from everything from AirPods to Mac Pros, and certainly including iPhones, all built on a single island, and especially when that island is considered a rogue province of our biggest adversary.
And on a seismic fault that will eventually go. Okay, next, Huawei. During the first Trump administration, the president, Secretary Pompeo, Keith Kroc, everybody turned Huawei into a leper. Are they still a leper?
No, they're more threatening now than they were before. So Huawei during Trump 1.0 was dependent upon Google for the operating system, right? They ran Android, and dependent on companies like Qualcomm to run 5G infrastructure. By kneecapping them, by taking them out of the game because they couldn't use those Western companies, they went into super aggressive 16-hour workday mode for 4 years. And now they've built their own operating system called Harmony OS, right? So you think about it, there's iOS versus Android. Now there's Harmony OS. If I was to make a speculative leap, I would say that by 2030, Harmony OS is the operating system for every smartphone in China. And
wow.
That's a major threat. So I think that really came back to bite us.
All right, next, de-risking the customer loyalty handcuffs to the Chinese consumer base. I don't know how they ever get away from that. I really don't, because the way you've described it in Apple in China, they need Chinese customers to survive.
Apple has about $70 billion of revenue in China. That isn't just bigger than any other Western company. It's more profitable than any Chinese company. And it's more revenue than major industries. I mean, $70 billion is enormous. And so, yes, they absolutely, if they were to do big moves in India, not only do they risk the ire of Beijing, who could, cut off electricity at a couple factories to make their point, they also risk a backlash from Chinese consumers who rightfully see the iPhone as an indigenous product. But if Apple becomes the poster child of decoupling from China, the backlash would be swift.
Now, let me talk about a good bit of news. I love the fact that their services division is, I love Apple TV. I love watching Slow Horses. I think they do great quality production. Can they diversify fast enough to escape their China trap, which I think is actually inescapable on the tech side?
Can they diversify? But you're asking about services rather than supply chain?
Yep.
I mean, I think services, nobody thinks of services as decoupling from China. And yet I think the decoupling in terms of investments in India is so inconsequential that the fact that Apple gets, a fifth of its profit from Google just being the default search engine on Safari, I think that has diversified Apple's balance sheet more than anything they've done to de-risk from China. So it's true that if things in China blew up, let's say, and you really couldn't buy a new iPhone for 2 or 3 years, I mean, at least they're getting billions upon billions in services, but I don't think that's enough to solve what I think of as an existential problem for the company.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the same answer, but I'm going to try with, how about the AI initiative? Can AI free, because I view Apple as a China addict after reading Apple in China. They are addicted to China. How do you get an addict off?
Sure.
You give them some different way to be addicted. Maybe they can become addicted to non-China dependent AI. Is that possible?
AI is really interesting. So on the one hand, Apple is not leading the AI race at all. On the other hand, they don't necessarily need to for 2 reasons. One, when I use ChatGPT, I'm using it through the iPhone. So insofar as I subscribe to ChatGPT, Apple is actually still making revenue there. Secondly, even if Apple's late to the AI game, Siri has access to everything on my phone in a way that ChatGPT never will. For privacy reasons,
true.
ChatGPT will never be able to go through my calendar, go through my email, and make the connections in an intelligent manner. Siri is allowed to do that, and it will always have a monopoly there, and Apple sort of has a legal right to do that because it's its operating system. On the other hand, AI is problematic because ChatGPT is illegal in China. And so Apple has yet to find a major partner to have AI services that, frankly, all the Chinese operators have, right? They're working with Alibaba, they're working with Baidu, and you almost have a joint venture relationship if Apple's going to do that in China. Meanwhile, it doesn't matter if I'm in America. If I ask Siri what happened on Tiananmen Square in 1989, I mean, it either won't tell me or it will cite somebody else, right? It'll tell me to go to Google or something. But Siri cannot answer those questions because it's politically taboo. It doesn't matter that I'm in America.
So, Patrick, I want to sum it up this way. I really want to get an investor's perspective from you. For many, many years, I owned a lot of Apple, and then I realized they have a China problem. I got out because I want Jimmy Lai out of jail, and I think Xi Jinping is a ruthless tyrant. So I don't want to really be heavily invested in people who are heavily invested with him. They can't ever not be, as your subtitle says, captive to China, can they?
At best, they could bifurcate the supply chain and have something in India 15 years from now that has replicated the China strategy. But they're not going to exit China in order to do that because they would be giving up a $70 billion business, per year. So that's nonsensical. But I wish I was more optimistic about India's capacity or capabilities or even motivation to do it. India just doesn't have the same sort of political wherewithal to push manufacturing as the be-all, end-all. Beijing has been a once-in-a-century partner that Apple's going to find a really difficult time trying to replicate anywhere else.
Do you own the stock, and would you buy the stock given the perils of the world that we have, even with the announcement from President Trump today about progress with China on trade?
So I won't evade your question, but let me just first say that as a journalist, I certainly am not going to trade in the stock, buying or selling or shorting a company that I directly follow. I only invest in index funds, so it's just in the S&P 500. So in that sense, it's probably my biggest holding because I invest in the S&P 500.
Yes.
But I'm certainly not trading the stock. So let's just be very clear about that. I don't sort of direct the portfolio in any way. As to whether one should buy the Apple stock, I mean, the problem with quantifying a risk here is, I quote someone at the end of the book saying Apple's relationship with China could blow up any day. Will it blow up? Does it have to blow up? What day will it blow up? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think you can quantify that. But in a sense, I'm less interested in that, or at least what I bring to the table here, is that China got where it was because Apple's DNA is all over Shenzhen, Chengdu, and Zhengzhou, and Suzhou. So the narrative that I'm really building here is that the US-China tech battle is the most consequential thing happening geopolitically for hegemony in the 21st century. And my book is the disquieting message that America's greatest company is playing for the other side.
That is exactly what I came away from. And I'm very glad I divested from Apple 5 years ago. And like you, I've got index funds, but I wish some index funds would begin to consider exiting Apple, because I don't think they can exit China. Patrick McGee, great book, Apple in China.
Thank you so much.
The capture of the world's greatest company. Thank you for the effort you put into this. Thank you for your time with me today. Wraps up today's Hugh Hewitt Show, America. What I do want to remind you of is Studio North, which you can tell looks different from all my other studios, is nevertheless being rebuilt by Relief Factor. I'm rebuilding it in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And that's because all of my studios are built by ReliefFactor.com. I've got one out west. I've got one in the Beltway. I'm going back to the Beltway studio next week, but I had to get up here to lay some groundwork for redoing this thing to make it look a little bit different. But I do want to remind you before I leave, don't leave home without your Relief Factor. I brought mine north. I took it in hour number 1. I remind you in hour 2 and in hour 3. Don't leave home without it. Feel good. Even after the weekend I had, which was, Saturday morning to Minneapolis, up late doing the Minnesota Family Council dinner, up early, flying to Studio North, driving to Studio North, working on Studio North, getting my 5 miles in this morning, getting ready with Generalissimo for the program today, making sure everything is working for the interim period of time. That's all ReliefFactor.com. At work in me, not just in the studio, but in me, because I take it every day, as you ought to. Call their number, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or visit their website and look for the starter pack discounted to $19.95, 3-week supply, less than $1 a day. You can find it at ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com.